why. For some reason, it took the intro a long time to like start up today. But this is Step Into the Story, and this is our November book chat. I'm Donna Jones Allward. I'm joined by my co-host, Barbara Tanner Wallace.
Hello.
We're authors and readers, and we love chatting about books, of course, which is a good thing because we're going to dig into this month's read, which is The Cuban Heiress by Chanel Cleeton. I'm excited.
I am super excited. I'm going to hold it up. It's probably backwards because I don't know if my camera's working or not.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what. If you hold it up and I'll hold it up in between us, one of us will be right side around.
There we go. There we go. And it's a gorgeous cover. It's fun. It's flirty, which is exactly what this book was. This was the first time you ever read a Chanel Cleeton book, right?
Yes.
Was it a treat?
So I got like maybe a third of the way through and I was like, what took me so long? Because I just loved it. And I know I'm going to be glomming up some of her backlist. And also she has her new book coming out as well. I think first quarter of next year. When's it out? March? April. Okay. So I'm going to be she's definitely going to be a read again author. And you're already a fan because you've already read some of her work. So what have you already read?
I read Our Last Days in Barcelona, which is part of her family saga. And I've been meaning to go back and read the others. That's one of the ones that Reese Witherspoon picked.
Right.
She's a Reese Witherspoon pick. You could easily hate Chanel Cleeton because I don't know if you saw the picture of her on the back of her book, but she's gorgeous.
And young.
Yes, young and blonde and very, very beautiful. And it's like, oh gosh, good. She's talented. Could she suck more? But truthfully, I love the book. I love the first one. I meant to go back. It's just that there's too many books. And as soon as I finished this book, I did get the notice that she had an April book and she's going to do kind of a gothic thing. And I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah.
So yeah, she's definitely a buy again. She's quickly become an auto buy for me. And, so why don't you tell us about what this book is about though? Because this is not connected to her family saga. This is a standalone.
No, this is a standalone. So the Cuban Heiress is set aboard this luxury ship called the Morro Castle in 1934. And this ship actually existed. And it did these cruises from New York down to Havana and back. And so our two main characters, Elena and Catherine, are on board, but they are not who they say they are. Elena's on there to seek revenge. And Catherine is there with her fiance, who thinks that she is an heiress, but she's also not who she says she is. She's really an imposter with her own agenda.
Yep. Both
women find themselves in danger. Both are assisted by men who are not strictly good guys, but they are. Harry's a jewel thief. Julio has some connections that he uses for illegal means, but they're on the right side, if that makes sense. So the Morro Castle, what happened to it is a matter of record. It did. There was sort of a disaster that happened off the coast of New Jersey. So, of course, the plot comes to a head when the ship is in peril. I found it really fast and evenly paced. And I kind of hold back from giving a whole lot more story detail because I felt like Cleeton really did such a good job of revealing plot points, just layer by layer.
Yeah.
And I don't want to give away those plot points because it was almost like when you get those Christmas gifts at one of your Christmas parties and it's like it goes around and the music stops and you unwrap a layer of paper. And then it goes around again, and then the next person unwraps a layer of paper. And so it's just layer by layer till you get to the prize inside. So I don't know if you've ever played that Christmas party game, but that's what it was like to me. It just kept unwrapping another layer of who these characters were.
Sounds like a very Canadian thing, but we will get.
I did it. I know we did it.
Yankee stops in New England.
Okay, it needs to be a new game.
Okay, nope. New England, we do Yankee swap.
Well, we do Yankee swap here too, but this was another one. I know I can find it somewhere, but I do know we did it at company parties before. But it's like musical chairs, only you're unwrapping a present.
Okay.
That's what like 7 or 8 times. But anyway.
But you're 100% right, because it was, she didn't do any info dumping at all. I said to you, and I think earlier, I said, this is where her romance background comes in. And that's a compliment. She is a former, I think she's actually even a former category romance author who went to contemporary. I could have sworn I saw a category for her in like a used bookstore. And that's because of that. I think she's got, that's a reason I said it's a compliment, is because the really good romance writers have a really good handle on pacing.
Yeah.
And because their editors are going to nail them if they
yes,
bogged down, especially the category authors, in which you and I come from the category background, then our editors would never let us waste a page, and they would never let us info dump. And you can tell that the way everything is a steady, I looked at it like a coffee maker, a steady drip, 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 drip of information. It didn't come out of the blue, but she didn't dump it all at one time either. It was just enough to make you guess at something and wonder what's going on next. And then she, like you said, peel back another layer and peel back another layer. And then of course there was the ending, which with the disaster, and that threw a wrench into the entire plot.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a plot point 3/4 of the way through the book that I won't mention again because of spoiling, but it actually caught me off guard. I thought I had everything figured out, and that one particular plot point was like, oh, well, there's some new information. But yet it wasn't, because she had laid all the clues up till then. So it didn't go nowhere. It was just a surprise.
Right. And I love it when authors can take that and make that twist. And it feels like it's out of nowhere. But then when you look back at it, you're like, oh, yeah, she planted all the seeds. And of course, but you're still not expecting it. So
that's what I loved. And I love that about it. One of the things we do often is, because there's 2 female leads. Did you have a favorite?
Sort of. So this one was harder for me to choose because I really liked both characters. But I think if I had to pick one, I would pick Catherine. And I think that's just because her character is more visible. And in some ways, I felt like because she was more visible, the danger to her was more tangible. And so, I felt like she was more in danger of being found out. And she was the one that was sort of her, oh gosh, I don't want to spoil things. But
she put herself in peril.
She really did. She really did. And I also loved her flirtation with Harry. Like I was telling you earlier today, it felt very Bogartish to me.
Yeah, I was thinking about like Cary Grantish,
he was smooth but roguish, but also genuine. Like it was so vintagey and classic. I really loved that. And I loved Catherine because even when the ship becomes in peril, it changes things. But even when her plans go awry for what she thinks is going to happen, she is determined to follow, like to see it through no matter what. And so she was super strong. But then on the other hand, so was Elena. Elena was so resilient. And yes, her story took place a lot in the background. And she wasn't as visible to other people on the ship and that kind of thing. But she was so resilient. And they were both focused on their end game. Really. And so I really liked them both.
I did too. I think, again, this is where the fact that Chanel didn't do a lot of info dumping. Again, with the character, she did the same thing as she did with the plot, is she gave you little bits and pieces that you could see them and you wanted to like them, and she gave you very sympathetic ones. There is a scene where Elena is looking in on her old life and you really feel the pain that she's feeling of the things that she may never see again. Yeah. And it's a beautiful scene. And that's when you really love her. And which is funny because on page 1, and I know I'm not spoiling the book because page 1, she's very blunt about it. Elena's there to kill somebody.
Yeah, you figured that out very quickly, that she's there for revenge.
That's not a spoiler. When on page 3, she's got a gun.
Yeah, okay? And there's a gun. So, you can put that together.
Yeah. but interestingly, and this is another thing we were talking about. I read a book right before this one where you also had characters that were doing some things that were less than legal, and you had no sympathy. That too involved the murder of somebody, and I had no sympathy for the characters. I was like, I don't condone what you're doing, and I don't find what you did realistic and forgivable. Whereas Elena, because she brought them to life so richly, all of these people, that she never pretended that Elena was anything more than what she was, which was a woman looking for revenge. But you understood why the revenge, and you saw what she had been and what created her this new Elena. And the same with Mary and Catherine. They openly admitted why they were committing crimes.
Mm-hmm.
And there was like little pieces of their past that we go, oh, well, that makes sense. And they knew what they were doing was not necessarily right, but just
necessary.
a weird way. Does that make sense?
Well, it was still justice.
Yes.
Right? It's still justice. And it got me thinking. That's why I just thought of it. We had talked about how this is sort of reminiscent of Rebecca.
Yes.
But then I also got like shades of Jane Eyre in it. Like there's just some of that, like there's a slightly gothic feel to the backstory that just pulled me in.
It's very 1930s, which is perfect for a book set in the 1930s.
1934.
And I know that sounds totally kind of a stupid thing to put. I have read books in the set in the 1930s that felt modern. This felt like a book from this felt like the 1930s. Everything about it was the right element. You could easily see this as a film noir. With these people running around the ship. And she just did such a great job. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I found interesting is she does third person for Catherine and first person for Elena.
Nope, the other way around.
The other way around. I'm sorry, you're right. There was first person for Catherine and third person for Elena. Right. Which actually was very interesting. I liked that she did that because I liked that Elena was a little bit more held off a little bit. I don't know if I want to be completely in Elena's head. That would be a very depressing head. Elena went through an awful lot.
Yeah, here's the funny thing is that I kept forgetting that she was in third person.
Yeah.
And I think that was because Chanel did such a great job going into, first of all, deep point of view.
Yeah.
And she has really strong dialogue, which helps show character. And it felt just as intimate to me as a first person point of view would have been. Like I'd start one of Elena's chapters and I'd see like she or her, and I'd be like, oh yeah, she's in third person. And then I'd just forget all about it. So, cause it felt like first person to me, even though it was third.
But I think that choosing third was a very, what's the word I want? I'm blanking on it, but it was a decision made on purpose. It was very,
100%.
Yeah. And I think it was meant to keep her a little bit at a distance because you need her to be mysterious.
And she was more mysterious, right? She was more in the shadows of the whole thing. She was like the behind the scenes person.
And it was because of her backstory. You required her to be a little bit of a mystery.
Right.
And there were some moments in there that were so, I can't even describe it. Again, I go back to the whole old movie thing. It's like the movie's Laura with Gene Tierney or something like that, where she is kind of haunting.
She's worried about being seen. That's part of it. And that's part of why she's always sort of on the outside or on the perimeter or in the shadows, I guess. So it makes sense to have the third person. But that kind of brings me around to voice, because ultimately with this book, I fell in love with the voice. And I know, and it just sort of pulled me in. It was snappy and pacey, and the dialogue was sharp. And like, even though going through, there were a few tiny spots. And like, when I say tiny, I mean like really minor things that maybe I might have done a little differently, but I didn't care because I was caught up in the storytelling. And I think that's a huge thing for me, because you can give me the most technically correct book in the world and I will read it and I may like it. I may not, but it's possible I will not love it. But if you hit me with great storytelling, I don't care if the technique is perfect or not, because for those few hours that I'm reading, I'm completely entertained and I forget to read like a writer and I just enjoy the book. And like I said, the things that I found were so minor and nitpicky, but it wouldn't have mattered because I was so like enthralled with the story. It just, and that's strong storytelling for me.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think that in general, again, I'll go back to her romance roots because this was very dialogue heavy.
Yes.
Was perfect for this book because you didn't need a lot of historical information. You just needed, she set the time, she set the place, she set the era, and the voice matched all of that. But I think if she had tried to make it more narrative heavy, it would have spoiled the fun of this book. Because the banter and the snappiness of the dialogue and the relationship between Harry and Catherine and some of their scenes were very funny or ended kind of funny. He's a jewel thief. There's some funny things about that, the way they talk. And it was a great balance to Elena, who naturally had to be, because like I said, she's mysterious, she's haunting. It's a sad story. And there were great balances. Like I said, I've read other books by her or I read another book by her. This is her best book, I think, yet. I think she really came into her own with this kind of book. So I really hope that the next one stays along the same line. I think she's really found her niche. And as for voice, you said you were too pulled into the story to notice the story bumps. And that reminds me of, I went to a lecture years ago by Jane Porter, the romance author, and she was talking about this classic romance. And she's like, I loved it. We all loved it. And it was a classic. And it was one of those ones that you read and you're like, oh my God, this is the most amazing book. And then you sat down a few days later going, there were some plot holes you could drive through. What the heck? But at the time, you were so in love with the action on the page. And that's what a good voice does. It makes it, you can't figure out what you say, something maybe not making sense, but you're so in love with the voice and you're so trapped by the story and caught up in what she's saying and telling you that you don't see the errors. And I think that, now in this case, I don't think there were a lot of errors.
No. And it's funny because you and I have talked about books before where before a show or something, you'll say, and you'll say something and I'll be like, oh my God, I never even noticed that because I was just, I was just pulled along by the story. So it's lovely when an author does that. So I have one example of something that pulled me out very briefly. And again, it's nitpicky, but it was just toward the end of the voyage. And as we know, there's something that happens to the ship and bad weather comes in. And I just felt like it seemed like everything was great and they were having dinner and there were no problems. And then all of a sudden it's horrible weather and the ship's in peril. And I just felt like that transition was really abrupt. And
although, no, you know what? You mentioned that. And then I was thinking about because she talks about how everyone's stuck inside because it's rainy weather.
Yeah, but rainy is not the same as it's a hurricane and the ship is foundering.
Well, it is surprising that but the captain was sick, so maybe that's part of it. No one announced, hey, there's a hurricane coming. I would think they would have.
Right.
She did lay the groundwork for why no one told anybody.
Yeah. So it just, because I was thinking, you and I are East Coasters, so we're familiar with when hurricanes come. And usually for a couple of days before they arrive, the surf is up and the water's a little more rough ahead of the storm. And so I just, like, they were eating, but like the last time I was on a ship that it was rough and not storming, just rough. Like if you sat down to eat, things would move on the table, but it just seemed like they sat down to dinner and there was nothing, right, other than them being inside. And that, the plans to go out on the deck later had to be rethought. But
I've never been on a cruise ship, so I don't know what it's like in rough weather. I've had friends who said they sailed in it, and you are right, because my friend said that there's a lot of
yeah. So, but I mean, seriously, it was just about that transition being abrupt. So
Okay.
if the biggest complaint that I have about a book is that a transition in the weather was a bit abrupt, like how nitpicky is that? So
Yeah, that's pretty nitpicky.
yeah, it was just one of those things that I noticed it, but it really didn't detract from my enjoyment of the story. It was just something I noticed, and then I kept going.
Yeah, I didn't really find a lot. I thought she laid the groundwork and hit perfectly. I was just thinking while you were talking about the villain, who is halfway through the book, he's an obvious villain. He's not up until that point, and it's
right.
Does a great job of then suddenly things which you thought one way, you look at it the other. And maybe it's because I just finished a book that was much less enjoyable and had a lot more plot holes in them and a lot more like, why would they do that? This? And this was so clean that I didn't, I really couldn't find anything. This was truly a really clean, crisp, well-written book. It's like she spent forever on it or something. She just really had this plot.
I'm sorry.
It was brilliant. That's okay. I'm sorry you're choking, but it's brilliant.
I'm sorry you're dying. No.
I'm sorry you're joking. I'm going to talk over it.
Yeah. No.
So final verdict, recommend?
Yeah, 100%. And like I said, I'm going to be glomming a bunch of her list because I enjoyed it so much. And there's so often I'll sit down to read a book and I'll read some each night and it will, and then I'll finish it and I'll enjoy it. But with this one, like I didn't want to go to bed, but I had to, and I still had 70 pages left. And I knew that was too much because I was super tired. So the next morning when I got up, like normally I read at the end of the day and it's kind of my reward for doing all my work. I had my coffee on the table. Like I was sitting on the couch because my husband and I have coffee together in the morning, and then he leaves for work. He left for work and I didn't get off the couch. I finished my coffee and read the final 70 pages before I started work. So like it was a delight, really.
I read this I had it on Sunday. I messed up. And so I realized I had to read it. And I'm like, oh no, that's going to be one of those things where you don't work, you're reading the book. But no, I read it on Sunday and I couldn't put it down.
I know.
And you have to understand, in our house, Sunday is football day.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm going to skip the game because I need to read this. I want to know what's going to happen. I was more interested in the book, which is rare for me to like pass up football.
Yeah. I'm not sure I would have traded hockey for it.
I think you would have. I mean, it was that good. And I went on Monday morning and I was on Instagram doing a reel telling everyone that they had to read the book.
Yeah.
I really think it's fabulous. I slid it up to my list of books I really loved this year. I said I was having a hard time coming up with my best one, but I think this is one of the ones I'm sliding up into that. Definitely top 5.
And I think purely for like entertainment value and and storytelling. Because we've read some top-notch books this year, but this is one of the ones where it was just like, wow, highly recommend. If you want to spend an evening just getting lost in a story, just go get it. You know?
If this was summer, I would tell you to grab it for the beach. But
100%.
Perfect snowy weather reading. Perfect snowy weather reading. I can't say that enough.
Hot chocolate with Bailey's in it and the Cuban Heiress.
Oh, that's it. Yeah, if it's summer, throw yourself if you're in warm weather, throw a margarita or a mojito.
Yeah, pumpkin spice latte, whatever.
Something, but yes,
or eggnog for you, eggnog latte for you.
100% recommend it. I can't wait. I've got a couple friends who are big historical fiction readers, and I can't wait to loan it to them. And I know they're going to love it too. So yeah, I
think I'm going to give this one to my sister. And let her have a read because she was asking for a couple of books and I think she would really like this one. So I'm going to, next time I go to see her, I'm going to pass that her way.
And I'm now a member of the Chanel Cleeton fan club. So now I'm what? The Kelly Rimmer, the Bryn Turnbull, and Chanel Cleeton
Williams. And I know our fan club memberships just keep growing and growing, which is
the creep factor here. Like Barb's fangirl, it's just, but
that's it.
These women are all worthy of being fangirls.
Yeah. No, I 100% recommend, and I'm looking forward to her next book next spring.
That's it. So that is our book chat today.
Great. What's coming up next?
Well, same time, same bat channel on Tuesday. We are going to have Janet Ray Stevens, who is a friend of the show. She writes, she's going to talk about her Barrel Blue Time Cop series. But what she writes is the time travel historical fiction. I always like to joke around and call it Terminator meets Outlander meets World War II, because that's exactly what it is. It's a librarian sent back in time to save the world by helping people at World War II. And they're funny. Janet is very funny. She's very snarky, quirky. Oh, and the book is perfect. She's indie published, and it's the kind of book that people should read. It's one of those ones where I know from her personal journey that publishers liked it and couldn't figure out where to put it
because it's a genre bender.
She was a big time genre bender, so I'm kind of excited to give her a little visibility here and interview her. And coincidentally, the book 3, who's the conclusion of the 3-book trilogy, shows up in shelves, I think, tomorrow or Thursday. So she's releasing not on Tuesday. She's doing a Thursday release, I think. Yeah.
So it's out. By the time we do the show next week, it'll be out.
Yep. So everyone, go download your Barrel Blue Time Cop and start the reading. And then
link in the show notes.
Yep, we will. And on the 28th, we have our final writing room segment, which we're going to talk about next steps once you finish your manuscript. Now the real work begins.
Yeah. Surprise. You thought writing it was hard. Oh, dear. All right. So, yes, that's coming up. And then we'll be in December. I can't believe that another couple of weeks and we are going into the last month of the year.
That's it. We're going to be doing our annual, look for a blog or a post where we talk about our annual gift suggestions for the writers in your family.
The Cuban Heiress is a great place to start. So for all of you watching, you can join our community at facebook.com/groups/stepintothestory, or you can subscribe to our channel on YouTube or follow us on Instagram at our handle at stepintothestorybooks.
Thanks a lot for joining, and we will see you here, same bat time, same bat channel.
Bat channel.
Janet, I got to say that. And we will see you next Tuesday at 2:00 live.
All right. See you soon.